Ever bump into a grammar rule and think, who thought that up? Like,
Yeah.
seriously, why does a table need to be feminine in Spanish?
It's those little mysteries that make language so fascinating, right? And in this deep dive, we're tackling those head scratchers you sent in about Spanish nouns. We're talking gender, plurals, those little suffixes, the works.
Yeah, like from the get-go, you learn the noun is either masculine or feminine. But sometimes it feels totally random. Does a table care if it's la mesa, not el mesa?
Right. And that's the thing, it's grammatical gender, not about whether the table's off to a tea party. But even when we know that, it affects everything. Even words for people get interesting in this system.
Oh, tell me about it. I remember learning el soldado for a male soldier. But that's just la soldado for a female soldier.
Exactly. The article does the heavy lifting there, but you're right, not every word changes so simply. Some nouns are way trickier.
So it's not always as easy as swapping an O for an A. Man, I wish it were that easy.
Huh, wouldn't that be nice? While that O to A is common, it's not a guarantee. And get this, some nouns don't change at all, even for people. Ella artista. Same word. The article tells you if it's a man or woman.
Oh, that's kind of cool, actually. Makes it a bit easier to remember, at least. Those are called common gender nouns, right?
You got it. And you'll start noticing them everywhere once you're aware of the pattern. But we've only scratched the surface of gender. It's not just about people words, right?
There's like a whole system for objects and stuff, too, isn't there? It's a lot to take in.
It is. Think of it like language having a secret code. Trees, for instance, usually masculine, but they're fruits, feminine. El cerezo, the cherry tree. La cereza, a single cherry.
Whoa. Okay, I'm starting to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. It's like each gender choice adds a whole other layer of meaning to the word.
And that's just the beginning. Wait till we get into the really weird stuff.
So we've talked about how even inanimate objects have genders in Spanish, but how do you know which gender to use? Is there some kind of secret code I'm missing?
Well, there are some helpful clues, like a linguistic treasure map. You might have noticed that words ending in O are often masculine.
Right, like el libro for book.
Exactly. And those ending in A are often feminine, like la casa for house.
Makes sense so far, but like, what about la mano for hand? That ends in O, but it's feminine.
Ah, you see, you're already thinking like a linguist, spotting those exceptions. And that's where things get really interesting. Mono is a great example. Many of these quirks come from how the language evolved over time. Often they reflect influences from Latin or even Arabic way back when.
So it's like each exception has its own story to tell, a little glimpse into the history of the language.
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting when we look at how Spanish assigns genders to words it borrows from other languages.
Borrowed words, you mean like words that have come into Spanish from English?
Exactly. Think of it like this. When a new word enters the Spanish vocabulary, it's like it needs a passport, and part of that is getting a gender. Often, if it sounds similar to an existing Spanish word, it might just adopt that gender. It's like fitting in with the locals.
Ah, that makes sense. So la boutique for boutique works because it's a bit like la tienda, which also means shop.
Spot on. But when there's no obvious connection, things get a little more arbitrary, you know? It's like Spanish defaults to masculine.
Interesting. So it's almost like masculine is the default setting when Spanish encounters a brand new word.
You could say that. Now, ready for another layer of complexity. Let's talk about plural nouns because they come with their own set of surprises.
Oh, I bet. I've definitely stumbled over plural nouns a few times.
Well, did you know there are some words that are always plural in Spanish?
Always. Like what? How can a word always be plural?
Well, think about glasses. It's las gafas, always plural. Makes sense. Who wears just one lens, right? The language seems to understand that some things just come in pairs.
That's a good point. I never thought of it like that. It's those little things, those little insights that make such a difference when you're learning a new language.
I totally agree. But just when you think you're starting to get a handle on things, those borrowed words come back to shake things up again.
Oh no, not the borrowed words again. What do they do this time?
Remember how we were talking about how some borrowed words just take on the gender of similar Spanish words?
Yeah, like la boutique and la tienda.
Right. Well, sometimes those borrowed words, they don't always follow the regular plural rules in Spanish.
You mean they don't just add S or S? Oh man, this is complicated.
I know, right? But it's also kind of cool how Spanish embraces these quirks. For example, you'll often see los corners to talk about corners in a soccer field.
So they keep the English plural, and that's so weird. It's like those words are staging a mini rebellion.
It's true. It's like they're holding on to their roots, refusing to fully conform. But it's not just English plurals that Spanish grapples with, believe it or not. There are even some Latin borrowings that can be either singular or plural.
Wait, what? How does that even work? Do they just stay the same?
Yep, not a single letter changes.
You've got to be kidding me. Give me an example, please, because my brain is officially fried.
Take confiteor, for instance. You can use it as el confiteor or los confiteor. It's like Spanish can't quite make up its mind.
That's amazing. It's like the language is having an identity crisis, stuck between two forms. Seriously, it's like those words are saying we're sticking to our guns, we're English, darn it. Kind of funny when you think about it.
Right, like a little linguistic rebellion. But it's not just English plurals that Spanish has a hard time with, you know? There are even some Latin borrowing, super old school stuff that can be singular or are plural without changing a single letter.
Wait, what? Hold on. How does it even? I don't even know how that works.
I know, right? It makes you scratch your head a little. But that's the beauty of language, always full of surprises. Okay, so for example, you got a word like confiteor. You can use it as el confiteor or los confiteor. Same word, totally up to you.
Wow, you weren't kidding. That is wild. Spanish grammar, man, it keeps you on your toes. But hey, speaking of those little quirks, can we talk about those effective suffixes? Those things are fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. They're like the secret sauce of Spanish nouns. You think you know a word, then bam, a tiny suffix changes the whole feeling.
They really do. Okay, for anyone listening who's new to this whole thing, what exactly is an effective suffix? Can you give us the lowdown?
Sure. Think of it like this. It's a little ending you tack onto a noun. Might seem small, but it packs a punch. It can express all sorts of emotions, from being sweet and affectionate to being sarcastic, even kind of mean, depending on how you use it.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it, with these little suffixes.
Exactly. One of the most common types is the diminutive. You've probably seen it before, right? It's where you make a word sound smaller, cuter. Like perro, which means dog, becomes perrito for a little dog, a puppy.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that one. But you're saying there's more to it than just making something sound small.
Oh yeah, way more. Diminutives can also change how long an action lasts. Like instead of saying someone ran, you might use a diminutive to say they just took a quick little run. And like I was saying before, they can express emotion. It all depends on your tone and the situation, but they can be used to show pity or even contempt. It's like adding a subtle emotional layer to your words.
Whoa, so these little suffixes are seriously powerful. It's almost like having a secret code for emotions.
That's a great way to put it, and it gets even more interesting. The use of these suffixes can change depending on where you are in the Spanish-speaking world.
Oh, wow, really? So like a suffix you use in Spain might sound totally different in Mexico or Argentina?
Exactly. For instance, a certain suffix might be super common in one country, like in Andalusia in southern Spain. But then you go to Argentina and it sounds super out of place. These regional differences are what make studying language so much fun, you know? Always something new to discover.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's like these little details, whether it's a table's gender or how you make a plural or these tiny powerful suffixes, they all tell a story about the language itself. They show how Spanish has grown and changed over time, how it reflects the people and cultures that use it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Spanish nouns, they're not just words on a page. They're little windows into history, culture, even the way people feel.
It's like you're always peeling back another layer, finding something new. So to everyone listening, the next time you encounter a Spanish noun, don't just glance over it. Take a moment, look at its gender, its plural form, any funky suffixes it might have. You might be amazed by what you discover.
Absolutely. Keep exploring, keep asking questions. There's a whole world of linguistic treasures out there just waiting to be discovered.